good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at the 4th annual TED-like Talks at the Research Symposium. My name is Patricia Sanchez-Abril. I am a professor of business law and associate dean of the graduate school, and I just could not be happier and more proud to be moderating this session. Let me tell you a quick story that kind of highlights the value of what these three brave individuals are going to do here today. A couple of years ago at the business school, we were completely revising our MBA curriculum. And we went out and surveyed and talked to almost 100 high-level C-suite decision makers, the biggest companies in the US. And we asked what were the top three skills that students needed to succeed in the world, in business. And guess what the top one was? It was communicating complex ideas. Across disciplines, across industries, the most important thing was communicating complex ideas to multiple audiences, to broad audiences. And this is more important now more than ever that we're faced every day with a tsunami of information at our fingertips, right? And so what these three individuals are going to do here today really merits praise, and I'm already proud of you. Thank you very much for being here. I also want to thank the staff that put this together, and the dean, of course, of the graduate school, Dean Willie Prado, who's here with us today. None of this could have happened without them and without the bright idea of bringing a TED-like talk. Don't we all love TED Talks? I learned recently that TED actually stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And so it's not like a guy named Ted. And they started in 1984. So this was way before people could even imagine that the intersection of technology, entertainment, and design, right? So it also highlights another value of the graduate school, which is the interdisciplinarity of it. So today's three speakers are going to really speak from very diverse disciplines, but all with that value of communicating succinctly very complicated thoughts that ultimately change the world. So here's how this is going to go today. Each speaker has 10 minutes, and I'm going to introduce them. I will let them know when they have about a minute left, even though they're very rehearsed, so they're not going to need that at all. And then at the end, we will pause. I will invite them all back up, and we're going to have about 15 minutes to just ask Q&A. It could be about the substance of their presentation. It could be about their process in preparing for this kind of talk. And so start writing down your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Alex Calder. He's currently a third-year student in the Counseling Psychology Doctoral Program. He conducts research at the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and sociology. Alex's general research interests include morality, good living, and social processes. His current research involves developing a working model of alternative models of addiction recovery with an emphasis on the importance of social relationships. While originally from Redmond, Washington area, Alex spent several years in the Mountain West, which forever endeared him to downhill skiing. So his presentation is called Natural Recovery, a Hopeful Complement to the Disease Model of Addiction. Alex?
Addiction is like dancing with an 800-pound gorilla. You go where it takes you, and it destroys everything in its path. At least this is what I was taught while in treatment for my own addiction at the age of 19. After several years of full-fledged addiction, I had a brief stay in a treatment center, after which I moved into a halfway house and rotated in and out of 12-step meetings. Now, I am nearly 12 years sober, married with 2 children, and completing my doctoral training in counseling psychology, where my research focuses on the human potential for flourishing in the wake of addiction. It's generally understood in the addiction literature that social relationships are important for recovery, although the conversation of this issue is usually not made explicit. The purpose of my research is to make that conversation explicit by talking about the role of relationships in recovery. Addiction currently affects more than 14% of people ages 12 and older in the United States, and many more throughout the world. It's estimated that the economic burden of addiction in the United States alone is around $700 billion annually, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of people who lose their lives every year in relation to substance use. Addiction takes a physical, social, and emotional toll on the tens of millions of people who experience it, and the countless others who love them. So how do we explain why people continue dancing with this 800-pound gorilla in the face of such serious consequences? Much of addiction treatment and research subscribes to the brain disease model of addiction, which states that addiction is essentially a loss of control over substance use that leads to pervasive neurological changes, which in turn leads to further substance use, thus creating a vicious cycle. In this view, addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease that can only be overcome through specialized treatment. And specialized treatments usually are defined as private medical care, emergency room visits, hospital inpatient and outpatient groups, private psychotherapy, mental health clinics, addiction treatment centers, even jail, and social support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. The problem is, treatment for addiction is a relatively rare event. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, estimated that only 6.5% of people with a substance addiction received any treatment in the year 2020. I mentioned I was in treatment for a short time. I was there for 2 weeks. And in that short time, everyone there was eager to impress on my mind that there are only 3 possible outcomes for addiction: treatment, incarceration, or death. This is a rather bleak outlook for a young person wondering if their life is ever going to improve. But I've since learned through personal experience and through my research that there are more than 3 outcomes of addiction. And in fact, many people are able to overcome addiction without any treatment at all, something we call natural recovery. National epidemiological surveys reveal that around 25% of people who experience alcoholism recover without treatment. And by some estimates, the figure is actually higher, closer to 40%. Of all people who recover from alcoholism, 72% recover without treatment. And importantly, 80% of all people who recover without treatment maintain their recovery for 5 or more years. This suggests that, well, this has led some researchers to conclude, actually, that natural recovery is the predominant pathway out of addiction. And that's a rather strong claim. Unfortunately, the prevalence estimates for recovery, for natural recovery from other addictions to other substances are not as robust, mostly because the epidemiological surveys either don't ask about natural recovery, or when they do, they focus only on alcohol use. There have been other more modest attempts to estimate the prevalence of natural recovery from addictions to other substances. And a consistent finding in this literature is that the average time spent in addiction is around 5 to 11 years. And there is variability, of course, there's extremes on both ends. But this suggests that addiction may follow something like a natural course. And together with the epidemiological studies, this suggests that, at least for some people, addiction may not be a chronic relapsing brain disease. But how does natural recovery happen? In-depth interviews with hundreds of people who have recovered from addictions to substances like cocaine, methamphetamines, and heroin overwhelmingly indicate that social relationships are central to the process of natural recovery. Relationships create the context that motivates, initiates, and supports the natural recovery process. For example, the possibility of losing custody for one's children or of separating from a romantic partner can be enough to motivate and initiate untreated change. In some cases, the genuine concern expressed by a good friend can be enough to initiate or support natural recovery. But whatever the case, natural recovery occurs when a person is able to integrate or reintegrate into social groups that are held together by something other than substance use. This allows the person to redefine themselves, to create a non-addict identity where the activities and the social connections that make up their life are oriented towards something other than substances. And although we know that relationships matter, we still know relatively little about how relationships contribute to natural recovery. And this is where my research comes in. I'm currently proposing for my dissertation a grounded theory study of natural recovery from opiate addiction. And I'm asking the question, how do the social contexts and processes of specific configurations of relationships contribute to natural recovery? And this is what I mean. So we currently know that different kinds of relationships matter to different people. For example, for one person, religious involvement might be very important, while for another person it's not. Family may be more important for one person, whereas work is more important to another. We also know that, in general, these different kinds of relationships contribute to an overall process of natural recovery. But not all people share the same relational configurations in their life. So what about the differences? For example, we might have a person whose social connections are primarily their parents, an old group of friends, and their renewed involvement in college studies. Whereas for another person, their spouse, children, and work colleagues might be their primary social connections. And the question is really, does the natural recovery process differ as a result of these different relational configurations? The purpose of my research is not to contend with the brain disease model of addiction, and it's not to suggest that addiction treatment is unnecessary, because there are many cases of addiction that present with a chronic relapsing course that require specialized treatment. My contention is that natural recovery provides a hopeful complement to the disease model of addiction by providing an alternative to the many people for whom addiction treatment is unavailable, unappealing, or simply ineffective. Thank you.
Our second presenter is Frosch. She's a first-year Ph.D. student in the Community Wellbeing Program. Her focus of study is how we can utilize tech to promote equity and wellness. Steph has been a speaker at the 50th commemoration of Stonewall, World Pride, Google, Apple, Paramount, Warner Brothers, the American Alliance for Theater and Education, VidCon, and several schools and universities throughout the country. Steph co-founded Interactions, one of the nation's first queer youth theater programs, in partnership with the Zebra Coalition, a nonprofit that provides services to LGBTQA+ youth to AI+ facing homelessness. Her presentation is Control-Alt-Oppress, How Psychodigital Conditioning Reinforces Social Oppression. Steph.
Once again, my name is Frosch. I am a first-year PhD student in community well-being, and I'm so glad to be here with my fellow researchers and academics. We've gone through, peer reviews, citing works. But let's just be honest. How many of us are guilty of just saying the phrase, just Google it? So we've got two people in this room, people who have and liars. All right. Well, why do we go to Google? Because it seems unbiased, because it's made of numbers and computations. It's just something that we trust and view as something that can just be objective towards what we're looking for in the grand scheme of knowledge. But in 2011, when Dr. Safiya Noble searched Black girls because she was trying to find an activity for her nieces to do during a sleepover, this was the first page of results, all of which were pornographic. So that brings us here into Control-Alt-Oppress. I want to talk to you guys about the internet because I feel like most of us view it as this non-biased space where we all can equally contribute and participate. But it's not. It's made to only serve the elite, and it's made to serve the rest of us to think that we are in the elite. So let's get to stats about what is real, what is not, or what do we even believe is real. This is by the Pew Institute. 73% of Americans have used a search engine at some point. 59% do so on a daily basis. 83% is Google. And 73% believe search engines are fair and unbiased sources of information. What does that say if you're a 14-year-old girl and you type in Black girls online, and 73% of society associates that first page with you? That's heartbreaking. And it's why we need to start having these conversations and talking about it. We need to realize that what these previously public sources are now being facilitated through privatization. And that's really what's at the cause of this. So these online monopolies take the most valuable assets of our humanity. I'm not talking about money or power, but mattering, the ways in which we feel and add value in our communities. As a community psychologist, it is so important to stress that mattering is essential to well-being. But when we're in a place where suddenly mattering can't really be considered, can it? What happens to mattering when it's ranked? Who decides another person's value over another? What does that mean? And how is that going to impact our future? We already have so many examples of how media influences us, such as the way Black individuals are portrayed in media is detrimental to their self-esteem and self-worth. The way women are represented online reflects traditional sexist hierarchies, where they feel objectified. So we need to really be talking about this in order to make a change. This process, I feel, is so much faster than we've ever seen before. And it's because oppression, when it's really good, it remains invisible. This new agent of oppression is what I have termed psychodigital conditioning. Psychodigital conditioning is the in which you are programmed by digital media, and it impacts your psyche. And how it programs your psyche is going to be detrimental to the society you live in. This keeps you from being a free thinker, thinking critically, independently. It even changes your views and values and outlooks on life and the world, which lead to socio and economic consequences. And it is so much faster than anything else before. You see, we're psychodigitalized to process information faster, so that way we bypass the context and we just sign the terms and conditions. I woke up one day and I was told skinny jeans weren't cool anymore, and suddenly you only had to have your hair parted in the middle. My 5-finger forehead and I did not like that, but what got me even more was the speed of it. So if we can make those notions about fashion, what is it going to do to society and certain people? This impacts everyone, which is terrifying. There have been numerous accounts of Google being brought down, or at least warned, or at least being given a slap on the wrist for injustices. Non-binary people don't have as much access to viewing jobs. AI doesn't really incorporate people of color. LGBTQAI plus people are demonetized and deemed as inappropriate, even family-based information. There's things such as a program called Northgate, a AI system used by judges to determine whether or not a defendant is more or less likely to commit a crime. The program found that Black defenders would be most likely to commit a crime, and white defenders would be most likely to not, ending in the results being these prison sentencings. You had a bunch of white prisoners free, even though the data does not align with that. Another thing that's problematic. The thing is also, Google doesn't just diminish these things, it defends these things. In 2011, when you would search the word Jew on Google, the entire first page was anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial websites. And this was brought to their attention. I, as Jew myself, was infuriated by this. And when the Anti-Defamation League went up to them, they simply responded saying, it was not their fault, but it is the fault of the users, because the algorithm learns from them, and they can't put their hands in that, even though their hands invented the algorithm. And even though in other countries where it's illegal to sell Nazi memorabilia, so Google has in fact done these examples and filters before, they're choosing not to. But why would they do that? Why? Is there a glitch in the system? Like, I don't know. So we really have to look at who are these people enforcing these algorithms. And it's because there isn't a lot of diversity. How can marginalized voices be in the room to help make the change when no one will open the door for them? And when someone does, it's slammed right afterwards. You know, in 2018, women made up only 25% of employment in tech, despite making up over half the workforce. Only 3% of Black women work in tech, and only 1% comprised of Latina and Hispanic women. So we really need to open up these doors. So is this a glitch? Is Google racist on purpose? Was it an accident? Was it an accident by everyone else? We don't like as community psychologists, we are not about the notion that we should blame individuals for their own misfortunes, because that only addresses people, not the complex systems pressing them. And this is the system itself. It is found that Google uses controversial posts and promotes them more because controversial posts generate 1.65 more screen time than non-controversial posts. It's why programs like Facebook feed off addiction, because they need to keep you online for as long as possible. It's why when you do a search for a vegetarian meal, you suddenly get suggestions for veganism. It's why if you're looking up candidates for next election, whichever way you're going towards, you're radicalizing one way or the other, and that is why our society is so polarizing, because it makes them money. But that's not the only way Google makes money off of you. There's a process known as labor-tainment. So what happens is, because there are no laws or regulation regarding the internet, there actually has not been a single law or regulation for the internet since 1996. And we have changed a lot since 1996. So what this means is that this lack of regulation means that you technically sign away your digital agency. Every time you accept a cookie, every time you accept the terms and conditions, you are selling away your digital autonomy and you are agreeing to being the product. So the longer you are online, the more personal information these sites can take. It's like when you're watching Criminal Minds and they're on the phone with someone and they're trying to find the location and they keep saying, keep them on the phone longer, keep them on the phone longer, because you get more information that way. And that's exactly how it is online. So the more controversial, the longer you're going to be there on these posts. And this is scary and infuriating, and this lack of transparency is not changing anytime soon. So we need to be accountable for enforcing that change. We need to be vocal about this, and we're doing it right now by learning. There's other ways that we can find information. For instance, this is the search word beautiful on Google. This is the search of the word beautiful on Mediger, a non-profit internet search company. And it really shows, what are our kids going to grow up thinking? How are they going to feel worthy? How are we as adults even going to be worthy? So there are things we can do. What I also think we can do is, if psychodigitalization is so powerful, it got us to this spot, I think that we could also use it to get out of it. We need to reframe the internet to prioritize social equity over equity. We need to give opportunities and grow the algorithmic literacy gap so that way everyone has a voice and autonomy. And we need to increase regulation and digital autonomy in a way that reinforces protections and ethics for those who are marginalized. So please, I know it's simple, I know it's easy, but just research it next time. Thank you.
Our third presenter is Changzhao Wang. She is a Ph.D. candidate in the Department of Teaching and Learning, specialized in STEM education. Before pursuing her Ph.D., she received her bachelor's degree in physics and worked as a physics teacher for years in China. Currently, her research interest is on gender equity in STEM learning and interdisciplinary STEM learning and assessment. Her presentation is called Imagining Robots of the Future, examining sixth graders' perceptions of robots through their literary products.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here to listen to today's last presentation. My topic is about robots. Speaking of robots, what immediately comes to your mind? A quick answer. Anyone? Okay. I believe some of you were thinking about the robots you know. It may be the robots that has become common in our daily life, such as the robot vacuum that has been used in thousands of households for cleaning. It may be the robots that we can see on TV or internet, such as the robot used for cooking and serving food in the Beijing Winter Olympic Village. It may also be our imaginations about robots in movies and fictions, such as Robot Run in the movie Run's Gone Wrong. Some of you may also think of your feelings or comments about robots. Some robots are cute and lovely, such as Robot Run. Some robots are helpful, intelligent, as the audience just mentioned. But there are also negative voices, not necessarily from you, but there are. Say, what if robots take over our jobs in future? Well, it is time for us to think about not only robots' appearance, but also robots' role, what kind of role they play in the society, and our relationship with robots. All this thinking points to the need of a deeper understanding of our perceptions of robots. As educational researchers, we are curious. What kinds of perceptions do our kids hold to robots? This is the robot now. In the year 2019, our research team ran a STEM curriculum at a local middle school with this robot. The curriculum integrated robotic programming and literacy education. We gave students integrative tasks, such as writing short stories or creating comic strips based on their robotic programs, designing a new sensor for the robot. At the beginning and end of semester, we also had students to write a story about a robot living or working with them in 20 years. Then there came the guiding question. What kinds of perceptions of robots can we find from their writings, drawings, comics, and designs? Then we obtained consents from students and collected 80 such products. a lot of interesting robots were portrayed by the kids. Before I show you their robots, I want to do a quick poll to see your perceptions of robots. So, have you ever thought that robots would have gender? Raise your hand if yes. 4, only a few. 2 or 3, okay. And have you ever thought robots should be like human? Okay, okay, a few. Or a machine? Okay, a lot more, obviously. Like animals? Okay, even less. Cool. So let's see how students portray the robots. The first one that has a microwave as head for eat. And the second robot that has a cat-like face but human body shape. And it is a boy. And a robot that looks like a cart. And the last 2 robots that look like turtles and can serve food and candy. So then for analysis, we built a theoretical framework of robot identity to capture students' perceptions of robots from 4 dimensions, including nature identity, social identity, emotional identity, and evolutionary identity. Nature identity captures students' robots' appearance, gender, and capabilities. Social identity includes robots' professional roles in the society and their relational roles with others. Emotional identity includes robots' emotion to others and humans' emotion to robots. And evolutionary identity includes the population and advancement of robots in future. Then based on this framework, we coded each of the 80 products we collected from students. We found a lot of variations among students. They also share some commonalities. I'll discuss with 2 examples. The first example is a story written by Stella. Stella also drew the robot image for her story. Obviously, this robot has a female human face and body shape, but has wheels as hands and feet. And she has a female name, Cherry. From the image, we can tell that Robot Cherry resembles a human more than a machine. And in the story, Stella wrote, robot would become the sign of the times in 20 years, showing a positive attitude towards the prevalence of robots in future. At the beginning, Stella hated robots, but because Cherry had a superpower of reading human minds, so she knew it. She made breakfast for Stella and took her to the park and to eat ice cream. Then Stella changed her mind and decided to make friends with Cherry. Like Stella, most students preferred human-like robots than machine-like robots. And they describe robots having some superpowers, such as reading human mind and time travel. The robots had different social roles in the society, including radio announcer, pharmacist, lab assistant, and so forth. But the most popular professional role for the robots are cooking and doing housework. They developed close relationship with robots. Robots became their friends, companions, colleagues, classmates, and even family members. They liked their robots, and robots liked them as well. Only a few of students expressed concern about the danger if robots were misused by people. And they, in general, believed that robots would become more popular and more advanced in future. Another representative example is a comic product by Kenya. Let's have a quick guess. So, among these 3 characters, which one do you think is the robot? It's hard to tell, right? All of the characters look like real human. So actually, this one is the robot William, who looks and talks exactly like a human being, except that he has the superpower of teleportation and instantly changing clothes for people. observe the fun fact that the images of all the characters were actually from Kenya's life. Robot William is actually the name of her male classmate, and the other characters were herself, a female classmate, and her mom. It is common for students to project familiar people and themselves onto characters in their stories, but they have different preferences. Some students were like Kenya. They usually blur the boundary between robots and humans. They could project human onto a human character or on the robot characters in their stories. But some students were like Stella. They clearly distinguished robots from human, which means that they never projected human onto robot characters, but only onto human characters. We also observed that an interesting perception about robots' gender. Most students in our study included female robots in at least one product, but previous finding said that K-12 students dominantly perceive robots as male, so this is a different finding. And our students were more likely to perceive robots as having the same gender with themselves. To summarize, so we have found students' perceptions of robots from their writings, drawings, comics, and designs regarding the different aspects of robot identity. We have seen an imagined future of robots by our students where robots and humans coexist peacefully. Our study has updated human knowledge about how 6th grade students perceive robots, and we believe that these findings are informative for teachers, curriculum designers, and researchers when they consider designing and implementing robot-related courses to students of a similar age. Maybe after this talk, you will start thinking about what robots will be like in future. For more information, welcome to scan the QR code on the left to access the article which has been recently published, and you can also find me on ResearchGate. Thank you so much.
Wow, just wow. Congratulations to the three of you. I think we need a full round of